I knew something was wrong before I could have told you what. It came to me the way a wrong note comes to a man who has heard the song 100 times, not as a thought but as a flinch, a small refusal somewhere under the breastbone. I had crossed the lantern court of Renholt twice that evening, threading the masked crowd with my candle ledger under my arm, and on the second crossing I stopped between the music and the wine and stood very still, the way I had watched the sentry at the velvet stair stand still for 11 winters, and I thought, someone here is pretending. I am Aldous Merrick, and on the night of the long revel I was master of the mask to the house of Renholt, which is a grand name for a man who counts candles and seats the guests and makes certain the right door opens at the right hour. The long revel is our oldest festival, kept on the shortest night of the year, when the house throws open the lower halls to 200 masked guests, and the dark outside is held back by 1,000 flames. Everyone comes hidden. That is the whole charm of it. For one night the merchant may dance beside the magistrate and neither knows the other, and the dowager herself moves among her people behind a swan of white feathers, and no one bows because no one is certain. A mask is a kind of holiday from your own name. But a mask is also a place to hide a face that does not belong, and I had been doing this work long enough to know it. Let me tell you about the man I came to stand beside that night, because the story is really his, and I have spent the years since trying to give it back to him properly. His name was Trooper Beorn Catesby, and he held the post at the foot of the velvet stair, the narrow guarded stair that climbs from the lantern court to the upper rooms where the house keeps its private things. On the night of the revel that stair is roped, and a sentry stands at its foot, scarlet and motionless, while the masked crowd swirls below him like water around a stone. Most years he is decoration. Most years the worst that happens is a tipsy guest asks him to dance and laughs at his silence and goes away. Catesby had stood that post for 9 years. I had seen masked men try every foolish thing on him, sing in his face, balance a wine cup on his bearskin, walk circles around him counting his blinks. He gave them nothing. But what I did not understand until that night was that the giving of nothing was not the whole of his work. While they watched his face for a crack, he was watching them. Not their faces, he could not see their faces. None of us could, that was the point of the night. He watched the rest. The way a man set his shoulders. The way a woman carried her weight on the stairs of her gown. Whether a guest who claimed to be a guest moved like a guest. I do not read faces, Master Merrick, he told me once, when I asked him how he passed the long hours. A face lies easiest of all. I read men by their bearing. A man cannot put on a stranger's walk the way he puts on a stranger's mask. I thought it a soldier's boast at the time. I was wrong about a great many things in those days. The wrong I felt that night had a shape, once I made myself stand and find it. There was a man near the long table of sweetmeats, dressed as a harlequin in black and gold diamonds, a half-mask of gilded leather over the upper face, very fine. Everything about his costume said wealthy guest. He held a wine cup he did not drink from. He laughed at the right moments, a beat behind the laughter around him, the way a man laughs who is listening for something else. And his eyes, the little I could see of them through the gilded holes, never rested on the dancers. They went again and again to the foot of the velvet stair, and to the sentry who stood there, and to the rope, and to the dark climb beyond. A guest at the long revel looks at the dancing, the wine, the masks, the fire. He does not study the guarded stair. There is nothing up the guarded stair for him, unless there is. I told myself I was an old fussing fool who had counted too many candles. The lantern court was full of 200 people, and one of them was looking at a staircase. That is not a crime. I almost let it go. Then the harlequin moved, and I saw how he moved, and the wrong note rang so loud I am surprised the whole hall did not turn. He crossed the floor toward the wine, and he was good. He had the loose, idle drift of a man with nowhere to be and nothing to fear. But under the drift his weight was wrong. He set each foot down too carefully, heel before he meant to, and then a small correction. The walk of a man who has measured a room he should not have measured, who knows exactly how many paces lie between him and a door he intends to use. A guest at a revel does not know the room like that. A guest wanders. This man navigated. I have learned since that I was reading, badly and late, the very thing Catesby read for a living. I went to him. I should not have left my own post. There were the supper tables to see to and the dowager's swan to keep clear paths for, but my feet took me to the foot of the velvet stair, and I stood near the sentry as if I had business there, and I said under my breath, not looking at him, the way you learn to speak to a man who may not answer. Trooper, the harlequin in black and gold by the sweetmeats, do you mark him? I did not phrase it as a question. He did not answer it as one. He stood as he always stood, scarlet and unmoved, eyes forward, and I thought for a moment he had not heard me at all, or would not break his discipline to reply. Then he said, very low, hardly moving his jaw, I have marked him an hour, Master Merrick. He is not a guest. The cold that went down my back had nothing to do with the winter night. You are certain, I said. I am certain he is wearing a guest, Catesby said. It was a strange way to put it, and I did not understand it then. The costume is a guest's. The man inside it is something else. He has been to that stair 4 times tonight on 4 different excuses and looked at me each time the way a man looks at a lock. What do we do? Nothing yet, he said. A man looking at a stair has broken no law. We let him reach for what he has come for. Then he is mine. I want you to understand the discipline of that, because it is the heart of everything that followed. Every instinct I had screamed to raise an alarm, to call the household watch, to tear the gilded mask off the man and shout *thief across the lantern court. And every one of those instincts was wrong, and Catesby knew it was wrong and held me still by being still himself. If we had moved on a feeling, we would have had a wronged guest, an insult to the house on the night of its oldest festival, the dowager's apology to offer, and nothing proven. The man would have melted back into 200 masks and we would never have found him again. To catch a thief, you must let him become one. You must hold your post while the wrong walks toward you and not flinch, and that is a far harder thing than charging in. I had spent 11 years thinking the sentry's work was standing still. That night I learned the standing still was the work. So we waited, and I will tell you what we were waiting beside, because the man had not come for nothing. At the top of the velvet stair, in the room the house calls the cabinet, there is a thing called the Renholt tier. It is a single white stone the size of a thrush's egg, set in old silver, and it has hung at the throat of the house for 400 years. On the night of the long revel it is not worn. The dowager keeps to her feathers and her plain gown like everyone else. But it is brought down from the deep strong room and set, for that one night, in the cabinet at the head of the stair, on a stand under a glass dome, because there is an old custom that the tier must see the revel once a year or the house's luck goes out with the old year. A piece of festival superstition, 4 centuries deep. The tier sits up there under glass, lit by a single lamp, and the only thing between it and the masked crowd is a roped stair and a man in scarlet who does not move. I had set the tier under its dome myself, that afternoon, with the keeper of the cabinet and 2 witnesses, as the custom requires. I had locked the cabinet and given 1 key to the keeper and kept 1 myself and seen the 3rd sealed in the strong room. I knew the tier was there, and I knew, standing at the foot of the stair with the cold down my back, that the harlequin knew it too. The music turned a corner into something slower, and the dancing thickened, and under the cover of it the harlequin made his first real move. He did not go to the stair. He went to a woman. She was costumed as a columbine in silver and pale blue, a feathered half-mask, and she carried herself like a guest of rank. I had not placed her, but on the night of the revel I placed no one. That is the rule. The harlequin bowed to her, and she gave him her hand, and they went into the dance, and I lost the small comfort I had been holding, which was that I knew exactly where the wrong man stood. Now he was a part of the pattern, turning through the masked figures, and I could not always see him. "He has found a partner," I murmured. "He has found a key," Catesby said. I did not understand. He explained it to me later, in fewer words than it deserved, and I have filled in the rest from what I came to know. The Columbine was the wife of the keeper of the cabinet. The keeper held one of the 3 keys to the room at the top of the stair. On the night of the long revel, the keeper wore his key on a ribbon under his costume, against his heart, as keepers had done for 200 years. Because a key in a locked drawer is a key a thief can find at his leisure, but a key worn on a man's body must be taken from him, and that is hard to do, unless the man's wife wears it for him. The keeper had a bad chest that winter. He had come to the revel for an hour out of duty and gone early to his bed, and I knew this, because I had bowed him out the side door myself at the turn of the evening. But a keeper does not take the key to his bed. The key stays at the revel until the tier goes back to the strong room at dawn. So the keeper had done the natural, loving, foolish thing. He had given the key on its ribbon to his wife, and asked her to keep it against her own heart until the dawn, and gone home to his cough. And somewhere in the days before the revel, the man now dressed as a harlequin had learned this. I do not know how. A servant talks. A draper measures a costume and hears a wife fret about a husband's chest. A clever man with patience gathers 100 small soft facts, and one of them is a doorway. So the harlequin danced with the Columbine, and laughed his beat-late laugh, and turned her, and complimented her costume, and let his gloved hand rest at her waist where the ribbon crossed under the silver silk. And I watched a theft that looked exactly like a flirtation. "He cannot cut a ribbon off a dancing woman without her feeling it," I said. "No," Catesby agreed. "He will not cut it. Watch his right hand when the dance brings them under the chandelier." I watched. The dance wheeled them under the great branched light, and for a moment the 2 of them were close, laughing. The Columbine's head tipped back, and the harlequin's right hand moved at her side once, quick, the gesture a man makes to steady a partner, and then the dance turned them away and parted them as that dance does, sending each dancer on to a new partner down the line. The Columbine went on, silver and laughing, none the wiser. The harlequin bowed and stepped back out of the pattern altogether, toward the wine, and his right hand went into the breast of his costume and came out empty, and I knew the key was now against his asterisk heart and not hers. It was the most graceful thing I had ever seen done, and it turned my stomach. "He has it," I said. "Trooper, he has the key. We must." "We must do nothing," Catesby said, and his voice did not change at all, and that was what held me. "He has a key. A key is brass. He has stolen nothing yet but a moment of a woman's trust, and that we cannot prove, and the house would not thank us for trying. The tier is still under glass. Let him climb." "You will let him climb the stair, past you?" "I will let him try," said the sentry. And here is the thing I have turned over for years, the thing I tell young men now when they come into the house service thinking the work is all alarms and running feet. Catesby could have stopped it a dozen ways and a dozen times. He could have refused the man the stair. He could have called me to fetch the watch the instant he marked the wrong bearing, an hour before. But a house does not run on feelings, and a man's life is not to be broken on a master of the mask's bad note under the breastbone. If Catesby barred the stair to a guest who had done nothing but dance and look, and the man proved honest after all, then a sentry had insulted a guest of the house on the night of the revel, and there would be apologies owed and a post lost and nothing learned. The only way to know a thief is to let him reach for the thing. The discipline was not in the stopping. The discipline was in the waiting, in standing scarlet and still while the wrong gathered itself and walked toward him, and giving it room to become undeniable, so that, when he finally moved, he moved on a fact and not a fear. "How will he get past you?" I asked. "You stand at the foot of the stair. He cannot climb it without passing you." "He will not try to pass me," Catesby said. "A clever man does not climb over the wall when there is a gate. He will find a reason for me to open the rope myself." I did not believe it. A sentry does not open the rope of the velvet stair on a guest's say-so. There is no reason on earth a masked reveller could give that would move that scarlet figure to unhook the rope and stand aside. I was wrong about that too. The Harlequin had thought of a better lie than I could have imagined, and he was already setting it up, and the first I knew of it was a cry from the gallery above the lantern court. It was a young voice, frightened, calling down that someone had fallen, that a lamp had caught a hanging, that there was smoke. I could not make out the words over the music, only the pitch of them, the pitch that turns every head in a crowded room. The music stumbled and stopped. 200 masked faces turned up toward the gallery, and a thread of gray did seem to curl out over the rail, and a woman near me gathered her skirts, and the lovely, warm, sealed evening tilted toward panic the way a full cup tilts toward spilling. It was the oldest trick a thief has. A fire is a key that opens every door at once. In a fire, a sentry leaves his post, a master of the mask runs to his guests, a crowd surges toward the exits, and in the surge a man may go anywhere and no one will remember him. I felt the pull of it myself. My whole body wanted to move toward the gallery, toward the guests, toward the duty I knew. The standing instruction for a sentry in a true fire is to clear his charge and aid the evacuation. The Harlequin had not picked a lock. He had picked the one thing that would make a disciplined man unlock himself. And the Harlequin was already moving, not toward the door, but toward the stair, drifting in the confusion with his careful navigator's walk, his face turned up to the gallery like everyone else's, his right hand resting easy on his breast where the key lay. I looked at Catesby, and the sentry had not moved a hair. "There is smoke," I said. "Trooper, there is." "There is gray cloth and a thrown lamp," Catesby said quietly. "Look at the smoke, Master Merrick. It does not rise, it hangs. Fire smoke climbs. That is a man waving a damp rag over a censer. And the voice that cried fire cried at once clean like a line learned and has not cried again. A frightened child cries until someone comes. A paid one stops when the room turns." I looked again, and God help me, he was right. The gray was already thinning. No one had screamed a second time. The panic was running ahead of a fire that was not there, and in a moment the crowd would smell its own foolishness and the moment would pass, but a moment was all the Harlequin needed, and he was spending it well. He reached the foot of the stair, on the far side from where I stood, where another guest in a plague doctor's long-beaked mask had appeared as if from nowhere. A second man, I understood now, a partner, well-dressed, agitated, pointing up the stair. "Sentry," the beaked man said loud, the practiced loud of a man who wants to be heard widely. "There are people up there. My wife went up to the gallery. There's smoke. Let us up, man. Are you deaf? There are people." This was the lie. Not a bribe, not a threat, not an order to salute. A plea. The most dangerous lie of all, because it wears the face of the very thing the sentry exists to honor, the protection of people in danger. A guard who would die before he stepped aside for arrogance will step aside for a child in a fire. The Harlequin and his partner had built a fire out of nothing precisely, so that a good man's goodness would open the rope. And the crowd, frightened, took up the cry, "Let them up, there are people up there." Let them by. 50 masked guests, none of them in on it, all of them generous and afraid, turned on the still scarlet figure at the stair and demanded he move. I have never in my life felt a pressure like it, and it was not even aimed at me. Every voice in the hall told that man he was wrong to stand, the good one's loudest of all. Catesby did not move. He stood at the foot of the velvet stair with the rope across it and his rifle at the slope and his eyes forward, and the masked crowd shouted at him to abandon his post for the sake of people who were not there, and he gave them the same nothing he gave the drunk who tried to dance with him. But it was not the same nothing. I was close enough to see the cost of it. A muscle stood out along his jaw. His knuckles were white on the rifle. He was not a statue feeling nothing. He was a man feeling everything, the pull of the false fire, the pull of the crying voices, the dreadful possibility that he was wrong and there truly were people dying above him and his stillness was killing them. And choosing, second by second, against every soft and decent instinct, to read the room instead of obey it. "You will answer for this," the beaked man hissed, leaning close. "When they bring the bodies down, sentry your name." "There is no fire," Catesby said. He said it loud and clear and once so that the nearest of the crowd heard him, and his voice was so level that it cut the noise the way a true thing cuts a frightened one. "There is no fire above. The smoke does not rise. It is a trick. Stand back from the rope. No one climbs this stair tonight." The beaked man drew breath to argue, and that was when the harlequin, who had been edging unnoticed to the very newel post of the stair while every eye was on his shouting partner, put his gloved hand on the rope to lift it and climb. He had read his man wrong. He had thought, as I had thought, that the sentry's whole attention was on the loud-beaked liar in front of him. But Catesby had never once truly looked at the beaked man. He had marked him for a noise and set him aside, and kept the corner of his eye, the whole time, on the gilded harlequin he had been reading for an hour, because Catesby knew, as I did not, that the man who shouts is rarely the man who steals. The instant the harlequin's hand touched the rope, the sentry moved. I want to be exact about what he did, because it was not what the room expected and it was not what the harlequin expected, and the difference is the whole of the man. He did not strike. He did not shout. He did not seize the harlequin's throat or wrestle him to the stones, though he could have, and a lesser man would have, and the lesser man would have lost the case in the doing of it. A guest manhandled at the revel, his fine costume torn, his cry of *assault louder than any cry of *thief*. Catesby took one step to his left, between the man and the stair, and brought his rifle down off the slope and across his own body, not as a weapon but as a barrier, a level black line at the height of the man's chest. And he simply was there, immovable, where the harlequin meant to go. "The stair is closed," Catesby said quietly now for the man alone. "Take your hand from the rope." The harlequin froze. I saw him weigh it, saw, even through the gilded mask, the calculation of a man deciding whether the bluff was still alive. And then he made the choice that thieves make, the choice that the loud-beaked liar had been planted to make easy, and he played the wronged guest. He drew himself up. He turned to the crowd. He laughed that beat-late laugh, and he said in a fine carrying voice, "This man has lost his wits. He thinks me a criminal because I would go to my own wife's aid. Is this the house of Renhold, that a sentry bars a man from saving his wife from a fire? Where is the master of the mask? Where is someone with sense?" And 200 masked faces turned, in the new silence, and looked for the master of the mask. Which was me. I will tell you the truth. My mouth was dry and my hands were cold, and every soft instinct in me wanted to smooth it over, to apologize to the fine, angry guest, to wave the sentry back and beg everyone's pardon and save the evening. That is the disease of a man whose whole life is making a party run smooth. He will trade a truth for a quiet room every time. But I had stood an hour beside a man who would not make that trade, and some of his iron had gone into me, and so I did the hardest thing I did that whole night. I walked into the silence, and I stood beside the sentry, and I said, "The trooper has not lost his wits. He has more of them than the rest of us. There is no fire, and this man, sir, is no guest of mine. I have the guest roll of the long revel in my own hand. Tell me your name and I will find it written, and if it is written, I will beg your pardon on my knees before all this company. Tell me your name." The harlequin did not tell me his name. He stood with his hand still on the rope and his gilded face turned to me, and the silence stretched, and in the stretching of it the whole room understood. A guest has a name. A guest gives it gladly when his honor is doubted. Only the man who cannot give a name, the man who has come wearing someone else's invitation as he came wearing someone else's face, only that man stands silent when he is asked who he is. "Take off the mask, sir," I said. He ran. He shoved the beaked man into me, and he went not for the stair now, but for the side door I had bowed the sick keeper out of an hour before, The door he had measured with his careful navigator's feet, and he was quick. But Catesby had read the room better than the thief had read the sentry. The trooper did not chase him. A sentry does not abandon his post to run down a hall, and besides, the house on the night of the revel is not one still man. It only looks like one. Catesby had passed a word, quietly, in the hour he stood marking the wrong bearing, to the under-warden at the supper tables, to the 2 household men I had thought were footmen at the side doors, to the watch sergeant who keeps the dawn vigil over the strong room. The still man at the stair was the visible edge of a thing with many hands. The harlequin reached the side door and it did not open, because a large quiet man in plain livery stood against it with his arms folded, and when the thief spun for the next door, that one was held too. They took him in the middle of the lantern court, under the chandelier where he had stolen the key, and they took him gently, which mattered, because 200 witnesses watched and there must be nothing in it for a clever lawyer to call cruelty. The beaked man was already being walked away by 2 of the footmen, who were not footmen, and I stepped up to the harlequin where they held him, and I reached out, my own hand was steady now, which surprised me, and I drew the gilded leather mask up off his face. I did not know him. That is the small flat truth of it. He was a narrow, ordinary man of perhaps 40, with a clever face gone slack with the knowledge that the night was lost, and I had never seen him in my life. He was no one. That is what a mask is for. But Catesby, when they turned the man toward him, looked at the unmasked face for a long moment and then said, without any triumph in it, almost gently, "I know your walk, sir. I marked it the first time you crossed my court tonight. I will know it again if you ever come back." We searched him there before the company, so that all could see it was no plant and no trick. Against his heart, where the careful right hand had tucked it, was the keeper's key on its blue ribbon. And folded in his sleeve was a forged invitation to the long revel, very fine, the house's swan seal copied closely but not perfectly. The swan's neck curved the wrong way, a thing I would have caught at the door if 100 guests had not come through it in an hour, and the candlelight had not been kind to forgers. He had not come to climb past the sentry. He had come to make the sentry, or the master, open the way for him with their own good hearts, and he had very nearly done it. I went up the velvet stair then with the watch sergeant and 2 witnesses, the way the custom requires no man goes up alone, and I unlocked the cabinet, and the Renholt tier was there under its glass dome, lit by its single lamp, exactly as I had set it that afternoon. It had not been touched. 400 years it had hung at the throat of the house, and it had come no nearer to leaving the house that night than the foot of a stair guarded by a man who would not move, and would not be moved, which is a different and a harder thing. I stood and looked at it a long moment. It is only a stone, a white stone in old silver, that some long-dead jeweler cut and some long-dead bride wore, and 4 centuries of a house had decided it carried their luck. The thief had risked his liberty and built a fire out of nothing for the chance to put it in his pocket. And it would have gone into his pocket, and the luck of the house with it, and the festival turned to a wake, if one man at the bottom of the stair had been an ordinary good man instead of a disciplined one. The difference between the two is everything, and the world mostly cannot see it because the disciplined man's great deeds look like nothing happening. He stands there. He does not move. The crowd shouts and he does not move. And the catastrophe that would have been simply is not, and no one can point to the moment it was prevented, because prevention has no moment. It is an absence, a thing that did not happen, the quietest event in the world. We brought the tier down to the strong room that night, ahead of its time, custom or no custom, and I think the house's luck survived the breaking of the rule. The keeper of the cabinet came in the small hours, gray and coughing and stricken, having been roused from his bed, and when he understood what his loving foolishness had nearly cost, he could not speak. I told him what I tell you now, that the fault was not his. A good man trusts. A clever thief trades on exactly that. The shame belongs to the man who turns a kindness into a key, not to the man who was kind. His wife, the Columbine, wept when she understood whose hand had been at her waist in the dance, wept not for the danger but for being made a fool of, which is its own wound, and I told her the same. The thief had not beaten her. He had beaten her trust, which she should never be ashamed of having. The man behind the gilded mask was given to the king's officers at dawn. He gave a false name to them as he had given a false swan seal to my door, but the beaked man, his partner, was younger and more frightened and traded what he knew for mercy, and so we learned the shape of it. They had worked the festivals of 3 houses that winter, the masked nights, the open nights, the nights when a man may go hidden among the great and reach for what the great leave guarded by custom and good faith. They had taken a reliquary from one house and a set of seals from another, and they had come to Renholt for the tear, because the tear is the greatest prize of all, and because they had learned of the old custom that brings it down from the strong room once a year and sets it, for one night, behind nothing but a rope and a man. They studied the custom, the watch sergeant said to me, marveling when it was all written down. They knew the tear would be at the head of the stair. They knew the keeper carried the key. They knew the one night of the year the house guards its treasure with trust instead of iron. They knew everything. They knew everything but the man at the stair, I said. For that is the part the thieves could not study, and the part I have thought about every long revel since. You can learn a custom. You can forge a seal and copy an invitation and buy a costume finer than any true guest's. You can learn which key the keeper carries and where he carries it, and you can practice a navigator's walk until it almost passes for a wanderer's. You can put on a guest so well that 200 guests take you for one of their own. But you cannot put on a man's bearing the way you put on his mask, and you cannot fool, with a costume, the one watcher in the room who is not looking at costumes at all. I asked Catesby about it, weeks later, when the house had quieted and the story had become the thing tales become. I asked him how he had known, that first crossing, an hour before any of it. How a man could pick one wrong soul out of 200 masked strangers when he could not see a single face. He thought about it the way he thought about everything, which is to say a long while and then few words. A guest at a revel has come to be seen, Master Merrick, he said. He wears the mask so that you will wonder who he is. He wants the wondering. You see it in how he moves loose, easy, glad to be looked at. A thief wears the mask so that you will not look at all. He wants to be nothing, a costume among costumes until the moment he is gone. And a man who wants to be nothing moves like a man who wants to be nothing. He keeps to the edges. He measures the doors. His eyes go to the thing he came for and slide off everything else. The face he showed the room was a guest. But the man underneath had come to take, not to be seen, and a man cannot hide which of those he is. Not from someone who has spent his life watching the difference. The mask hides the face. It cannot hide the bearing. The bearing is the man. You never even looked at his face, I said. Not until the end. His face was the one thing about him that was a lie, Catesby said. Why would I look at it? I have carried that with me. We are a house that loves its faces, its portraits and its masks and its fine appearances, its swan seals and its customs. We had guarded the tier for 400 years behind a rope and a rule and the good faith of guests, and we had thought that enough, because nothing had ever come to test it. And what saved us in the end was not the rope and not the rule and not the iron of the strong room. It was a single disciplined man at the foot of a stair, who had taught himself across 9 years of being looked at to look back, and who held his post against a false fire and a false plea and the honest shouting of 50 frightened people, and would not move, because he had read the one true thing in the room and would not unread it for anyone's comfort, least of all his own. They offered Catesby a reward after. The dowager herself came down, out of her swan feathers and into her own plain gray, and thanked him in her own voice, which she does for almost no one. He took the thanks because it would have been discourtesy to refuse them, and he declined the reward because, he said, a man should not be paid extra for doing the post he is already paid to do, and I believe that is the only sentence he spoke to her. He went back to the foot of the velvet stair the next long revel, and the next, and stood it scarlet and still while the masked crowd swirled below him. And no thief ever came again that I knew of, though I think, if one had, the still man would have marked him on the first crossing by his walk. I am an old man now, and master of the mask no longer, and I have seen the tear come down from the strong room and go back up more times than I can count. We changed the custom, a little, after that night. The tear still comes down once a year to see the revel, because 400 years of a house is not to be argued with. But it sits now in a room with a true lock and a sealed door, and 3 keys that no keeper carries on his body into a dance, and a man at the stair who is told, before the guests come in, the one thing it took me 11 years and a near disaster to learn. Watch the bearing, not the mask. The mask is what a man wants you to see. The bearing is what he cannot help but be. And on a night when every face in the hall is a lie, the whole safety of the house may rest on one still man who never looks at faces at all, and who, when the wrong walks toward him wearing gold and laughing a beat too late, does not flinch, does not run, does not open the rope for the kindest reason in the world, but stands and waits and lets the wrong become undeniable, and then quietly, without a blow or a raised voice, sets it right. That is the whole of it. The mask hid a thief. The man at the stair was not fooled by the mask because he had never been looking at it. He had been looking all his life at us.